Welcome everybody to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette and you're here to stay curious. Today with payload expert Mikey Haddad. Hey Mikey.
It's always fun to be here, Mark.
Well, we're glad to have you here. He had a career with the Space Shuttle, mostly working on the payloads that were in the cargo bay of a space shuttle. And we're going to specifically talk about what today, Mikey?
Spacelab 3 mission.
Okay.
Yep.
And that featured a lot of animals, right?
Yeah, it's this one we had where we flew animals on. So and it had other experiments, microgravity experiments, but we're going to focus on the animal ones.
Yeah.
Hopefully. That's what
And
we'll talk
you're
today.
so think about it. You've got live animals that you want to put in orbit,
Mhm.
and you got the space shuttle out at a pad. Okay,
Mhm.
so the space shuttles are always out at the pad for about 2 months, right?
Month to 2 months.
A month
yes,
or
sir,
two months. Marty Winkle, my cameraman and co-producer here, he was involved with the launch process system. A month to 6 weeks out there ahead of time, Marty, is when they take it out there and start doing all the tests and stuff. So you can't put animals in there
Right.
for tests. So
Mhm.
you're right, folks. A team has to go out there with the shuttle vertical,
Yep.
where the lab is made to be horizontal.
Right. That's what we assemble and test
Yeah.
horizontally.
So how'd they do that? So stay curious. Mikey's going to tell you about how they got those. A couple. What kind of monkeys?
Squirrel monkeys.
Squirrel monkeys.
And then rats. Yes.
And rats.
Yeah, we had 2 squirrel monkeys, 24 rats.
Okay. Any
Yeah,
goldfish or?
And on this mission, we did fly fish on future missions.
Did
yeah.
you?
Yes.
Well, we're going to talk about some of those future missions because Mikey's written a book with a friend of his, David Shaler. Okay, go out and order this book on Amazon. Smile. So the American Space Museum, your favorite nonprofit, gets the. It's a technical book. Okay, this isn't for the lighthearted. All right, you go in quite deep depth there, which a lot of our space lovers love the in-depth stuff in there. They can't get enough of it.
Thank you, sir.
And you wrote this with David Shaler, and David is a very prolific writer. He's in Birmingham, England. We talked to him at the beginning of the month. I think that was like May 4th or 5th.
Yes, sir.
We talked to him with Mikey about the payloads. I forget what we talked about that show, but
It was general about the book and him and how he contributed. And
Yeah.
He helped a lot to make that book happen. Yes, sir.
and so he's got a nice little tome here on Apollo 11, and he's writing a thin little book like this about all the Gemini missions. So if you talk to David, I communicated with him a couple times.
Oh, good. Okay.
He enjoyed the show and hope to have him back on. So, all right, super. But no, stay tuned here. We've got some great information on Spacelab 3, which has one of my favorite patches because it has a constellation in it. But we want to give a shout out to Carlton Bailey. Carlton photographed this awesome photograph of STS-83 landing in 1997 on this May 25th, 1997. It was launched May 15th. That has in it Jerry Linenger, who's coming back from 5 months on the Mir Russian space station, and they dropped off David Wolf. So welcome home there, Jerry Linenger in 1997. Look at that. That's one of the trainer chase planes there in that picture. Carlton Bailey on top of the vehicle assembly building with his long lens photograph, and that a photograph you don't often see that on a landing there. So good job, Carlton. Thank you for all you do to partner with our Space Museum. And I'm looking at, why did we get that right there, Marty? Did we skip? Oh, yeah, that because he's our background there. I'm going, I have that picture loaded up here with space history. Mikey, you know the drill. We love talking about astronaut birthdays and space history. And let's see here. I made a boo-boo and didn't bring... oh, here we go. Here we go. I didn't load this up, Marty, but Danny Olivas. Danny Olivas is birthday today, and I forgot to load his picture up, but I will tell you, Danny is a 2-time astronaut. Happy 56th birthday today. No, actually, he's born in 65, so he's 57. Born May 25th, 1966 in North Hollywood, California. So happy 50, I got to make him 56. Veteran of STS 117 and 128, 28 days in space, 5 spacewalks. And he actually did an on-orbit shuttle repair, okay, on which would have been S-128, an Aquanaut, and he is now involved with director. He's at the University of Texas at El Paso. And Mikey, he was on Nickelodeon's "Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader" one time. So I wonder how Danny Olivas, Olivas, I want to say Olivas. I don't know how he pronounces his name, but certainly enough, I'm going to butcher it. Sorry I didn't rack up his picture there, but happy birthday to him. And of course, we want to thank Hyatt Place as we're broadcasting from the Hyatt Place studios inside the American Space Museum, where about an hour and a half ago we saw a rocket launch. Go show you a picture of that. But we've got to thank Ashley Nelson, who is the ground support communicator for Artemis. Thank you, Ashley, for a wonderful program. You got to watch that. This girl is smart, and she knows everything about Artemis, and probably going to go back out the first week of June and for a couple wet tests. There's how to follow it there. All of your social media things there. And we'll hear more from Ashley, and we certainly thank her for her time spent yesterday. And you can watch on YouTube or the Facebook library to see past Stay Curious issues. Marty and I are into our 570s episodes. Over 2 years we've been doing this Monday through Friday.
Great.
So, and here's a couple young ladies that watched the launch. There is the rocket launch of a SpaceX Falcon 9. That was at 2:35 this afternoon. It's a ride share, has several scientific payloads for people that are paying to ride that up there, and one among them is a bunch of ashes from of human beings going to orbit Earth at their final wishes, engineered by the Celestis company. That's has been doing this for quite a few years. And a friend of the museum and a friend of everybody out there, Emily Carney's working for Celestis, and we hope to have Emily on tomorrow. I'll be talking to her after Stay Curious today and see if she's got time to come by our Stay Curious studios and shine her light on us. Emily's started this Facebook page called Space Hipsters, and it has mushroomed to over 20,000 people. Love talking and sharing about space. So we hope to have Emily Carney on Thursday, and of course we've got Tales from the White Room with Triple T, Travis Thompson. But a beautiful launch, kind of windy. Marty, you were over there. I kind of thought the winds may hold it up for a while. It had about an hour and a half launch window, and of course the winds got to be bad, above the jet, above, upper level. Yeah, thank you. Upper level is what I'm trying to say. And Marty told me today that this little spacecraft called Phoenix landed on the planet Mars on 2010, 12 years ago today. It was, like the name implies, Phoenix. It rose from the ashes of the Mars polar lander that crashed into the North Pole. And we went there because we're positive that there's sheets of ice, Mikey, underneath this Mars soil that is red because it contains iron, and it rusted from the moisture in the air 3 billion years ago in Mars's 4.5 billion year history. But one of the more astounding photos that this lander made was underneath it, showing you sheets of ice there. Marty's going to point it out. These are blocks of frozen ice that the exhaust landing blew the Martian soil away to expose.
That's amazing.
An ice rink. It landed on an ice rink.
That's
okay.
amazing.
Isn't that amazing? And it had an arm on it, and it would dig out, and hoarfrost, like carbon dioxide, would form at night and then evaporate during the day. And I think they even saw dew on some of the structures of it there on time. It lasted a couple years till the solar panels got covered up with Martian dust, and it starved it to death for power. But an unsung polar mission, polar lander, 12 years ago today in space history. We've got another stationary lander called Mars Insight that is at its last legs. It's recording Mars quakes to know what's going on inside of Mars. And of course, we've got the two rovers the size of yours or your neighbor's SUV in their garage. Curiosity has been there for over 8 years, and then Perseverance landed about a year ago. So we love talking about our space history, and no more important time in space history for the American Space Museum than to talk about President Kennedy wanting us to go to the moon. And he gave two seminal speeches on this. The first was May 25th, 1961, that's never quoted, but he talked to Congress just after being sworn in January 1961. Then on May 5th, Alan Shepard did the first suborbital flight, and 20 days later, President Kennedy's saying we're going to go to the moon. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to undertake. So though he set the stage right there, it's going to take money, lots of money. But this came out of the Bay of Pigs invasion was a failure, and a couple other things weren't going so good at home for President Kennedy. Right away, a young 40, he turned 44, May 29th is his birthday. All right, so imagine that. And he says we're going to go to the moon, and we did it. And so today's a date in history. September 62 is when he did the famous speech at Rice University. That is the one that's where he says, in this decade, we choose to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And 52 years later, 53 years in July is Apollo 11. And I lived it as a teenager. You're a little bit younger than me, but it's hard to capture for the people today, the excitement, the unknown. We're going to the moon. We're going to that thing up in the sky. Yep. All right. Nobody's been there. And all of the movies and books and stuff written about it.
I remember as a little kid, I was standing on the shore in Titusville watching it across the water. And I thought, to me, it's just another rocket launch because we saw a bunch of rocket launches. Well, my mom says, you're seeing history happen with the launch of Apollo 11. I was just a kid. I didn't know what she meant. Now I remember that still to the day, standing there and watching that go off. Yeah.
Well, here at the American Space Museum, we consider ourselves the delivery room of America's space age. And one of the technicians was Marty Winkle over there working on the lunar module for Grumman with another 1,500 Grummies on the Space Coast here, putting that one-of-a-kind lunar module together that still stands 53 years later as the only vehicle built to operate in the void of outer space by human beings, but not just to operate in outer space, but to land on another world and then blast off that other world. Nobody's done that yet. And Marty, I'm so proud of knowing him as part of that, and all his Grummy friends. That we've had him on Stay Curious show here before. So you'll learn, and we'll have him on certainly in July. You know me, I can't escape talking about lunar landings. But another day in history today was when Skylab was launched with the first crew to Skylab. Skylab was launched May 11th, and it had problems at the launch until this crew went up. What happened was the solar panel and meteor shield ripped off about 60 seconds into launch. It went up in the clouds, so nobody saw that. And this crew, led by in the middle, Pete Conrad, Apollo 12 moonwalker, also an experienced Gemini pilot, and two rookies. Up there to the left is Joe Kerwin, and to the right is Paul Weitz. Paul has passed away, and so has Conrad, but Joe Kerwin is 90 years old. We published a picture yesterday, Marty, of him and the crew at a desk looking at in a meeting sort of thing. He was rocking a pipe, and I believe his daughter she communicated with us and said that he no longer smokes a pipe. He got rid of that 30 years ago. So that's when he was 60. He's 91 now, I believe. So
good for him.
Good for Joe Kerwin. And here's the two vehicles, a collage photograph, I think. To the right is the Saturn V, the last one ever launched, with and the shroud is covering the Skylab, part of it, but some of it's exposed up there that came off. And then the milk stool, they called it, is what the Saturn S-1B was on that launched the astronauts up to the Skylab in orbit on this date in space history in 1973. And I think, Tom Usiak, you sent me a photo of that launch, and I forgot to pull it off. I'll put it on Facebook later. He gave us a launch of the Saturn V rocket, and I believe he was here for the milk stool launch. So we don't want to forget these important missions of the 70s. So pioneering, so many unknowns, and so gigantic was that Saturn V rocket.
A monster.
So, a monster. There's Carlton Bailey's photo, STS-84 landing Kennedy Space Center in 1997 on this date. He was on top of the VAB. Well, Shuttles of May. Let's get to Mikey here in our main attraction. Glad that you're watching us on YouTube and Facebook. Tell your friends to like, share, follow, and subscribe to us because it means a lot to our nonprofit. And Mikey, you see, every time you come in here, we're doing something new. We'll have new floors, new carpet is in the works. We can't wait for that. And we're in our new studio. Our board of directors wanted Marty and I to have a studio out of the way. So we took our rotating gallery that had the Hubble in it, and we will have better shows because I've got more control of what we're doing here. So
this is really nice.
Close up. So,
really nice,
yeah.
Mark.
All right. Well, we're going to tease you a little bit with what is a RAHF, going back to the 10 Shuttles of May. All right. Our Shuttles of May included Endeavor's first and last mission, OV-105. Imagine that in the month of May. There were only, and the orbiter that was flown the most was Atlantis 5 times, Endeavor 3 times, and usually Discovery has the most in a month, but Discovery only flew twice. And Challenger nor Columbia were flown at all in the month of May. 10 orbiters, 65 tickets punched, I call it, because that's 60 humans. 5 of them had repeat flights in May. So 54 men and 11 women. It's a big month for women, actually, with 11 flown in there. 5 of these missions were hard hat missions to the International Space Station, including the one later in this week, 96, was the second docking with the space station. Very infant then, just a Zarya and Destiny Labs and some solar panels. And then 124 launched on the 31st of May in 08. That had a lot of supplies and the Kibo Japanese structure on it. So, Mikey, we like keeping up with the missions here. Now that you're involved with the payloads, that even we hope people appreciate more us tallying up these missions. So, Marty and I want to frequently, a couple times a week, tease you with some NASA speak. So this is one of Mikey's well-known acronyms, RAHF. Or did you call it RAF?
We call it RAF. That was kind of the short way of doing it instead of speak out all the.
So
the
you would use
words.
that in a context of what? Go over there and get the RAF?
Yes, or your working RAF, or this is a task to support RAF. So everybody knew what that meant. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're going to know what that means here, so just stay with us and stay curious. Mikey, we're going to talk about Spacelab 3. I'm going to shut up in a minute, but this is one of my favorite patches. I love blue. It's a beautiful patch. And this was designed, actually, by the astronaut on board, Don Lind, who waited I think he waited 19 years to fly.
Wow.
He was an Apollo astronaut. And he just was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And may have fallen out of favor with George Lowe was one of the stories too, that he helped design these crews. But the commander was Robert Overmyer, who passed away unfortunately a few years ago. Fred Gregory was pilot and later became a commander, African American commander, by the way. Don Lind, Norm Thagard, William Thornton. You had a payload specialist named Ludwig Vandenberg from, he must have been from, where was he from? You remember?
I don't remember. I'm sorry.
I want to say Dutch, Holland. And Taylor Wang of Japan was on this mission. So, the 7 stars show the constellation Pegasus surrounding the orbiting spaceship above the flag-draped Earth. The artwork was done by Carol Ann Lind, who I think was the daughter of Don Lind, the mission specialist on there. And it's a science payload inside the shuttle. So, a beautiful, beautiful. And I'm going to turn it over to Mikey to talk about what we're going to talk about here.
Okay, what I do is I actually have some words from the people who did. I didn't personally work on these elements, so I got information of the people that did. And so what I'm going to be reading here.
But you were working there. You just
I was still working.
exactly,
I was working in level 4 at the same time. And a lot of these we worked side by side. But I didn't work on this specific mission, but I was working in this group at the time. And so basically, starting out one of the engineers that worked, his name was Bob Ruiz, and we'll see a photograph later. And we'll start out with what his part of it was. He says, I was a branch lead mechanical engineer for Spacelab 3 and mechanical systems engineer for the RAF. We can figure out what that is later.
The RAF.
He said, I always thought that a lead should lead by example, so I took the challenge of RAF. It was late and early access, and we'll talk about what that means a little bit. As a RAF system engineer, I was responsible for integrating the raft into the flight racks 5 and 7. These are the racks that go in the Spacelab module. And our Boeing techs, best techs I think on the planet, to me personally, did the hands-on assembly, cable installation, fluid line installation, leak checks, flow balance, with the procedures, engineering paper, problem reports, disposition written by him as a system engineer. He was also responsible for late and early access procedures, the OMIs, which are the instructions used for doing the work, inputs and training, procedures writing, and the deviations associated with the integration. If something goes wrong, you got a dev. Test is a major effort for the Spacelab 3 engineers. The redlining of procedures, again, which was kind of, as things changed, you need to redline them, used during Spacelab 1, was replaced with procedure deviations, which took a lot of time. In the early days, we were able to just redline right on the procedure. Well, it got to be kind of crazy, and they didn't like that after a while, so they made us actually start writing official deviations. So that's what he's talking about there.
Okay.
RAF was a very complex experiment rack since it provided air, drinking water, lighting, and food for the animals. Each RAF had a drinking water tank, which was serviced in the operations stick-out building, and also sampled periodically to make sure the water was still good for the animals. RAF had a major issue with the pull force of the cages, and we'll look at that. If you look at that picture there, the cage on the on the very left part of the screen there, and what it was the pull force of the cages was noted by the flight crew during one of their tests, which is called CIT, which is where the crew comes in and does a physical hands-on. A problem report was written, which was called a crew squawk at the time, was performed many pull force measurements on the cages. The issue has turned out to be a connector on the back of the cage that Ames eventually end up fixing. However, just in case there was an issue during early access to the shuttle, once it landed at Dryden on the runway, they brought a special tool to pry the cage out if necessary. Kind of what happened after landing. Right after the astronauts got out, these guys went in to get these animals out. So they were basically the first ones in after the astronauts left. Again, now of course the shuttle's horizontal. It's a lot easier.
Right.
Putting them in, it was vertical, and that's what we're going to start talking about now. Kind of is how do you do that? How do you put these animals in? They have to go in probably around 24 hours before launch. And this is kind of a graphic of how that happens. Again, this is a shuttle at the launch pad. And kind of what you're looking at here from the side is you have at the top was called the middeck area, and that's what you see a lot of times on TV where the astronauts live. And then the tunnel that leaded down into the Spacelab module. Again, all this is vertical at the pad. So how do you get somebody down in there to do this work? And that's what's shown here is that basically somebody hanging from a wire, hanging on that wire, has to go down through the tunnel area and hang on there. And then there's actually 3 cables that was used during the operation. One was to hold him, and the other 2 to lower and raise components down that he would then put into the module. So this is the reason I'm bringing this up. This is the operation we had to do with the pad. Of course, the shuttle's being processed. You can't train in the shuttle to do this. Okay, and you definitely want to train. And he's got a great model here showing kind of the shuttle. Gives you an idea if you kind of can zoom in on that. You'll see that.
They're making
okay.
you point out there.
Yeah, kind of what you got here.
Here, you can use that as a pointer there.
Yeah, kind of what you got is you got the module here. Okay, then you got the tunnel, and then you got the middeck up here. Okay, and so kind of what we got to do is you got to basically bring hardware in to the mid deck and then down. You see, in that cable down through the tunnel, what we call a joggle, which is that little bone, like kind of little
They call it the
90
joggle,
290
huh?
degrees. Yeah, we call it the joggle because there's basically 290 degrees, one to the side and one back down. Didn't get into the module. Okay, so how do you do all this?
Yeah, yeah.
24 hours before launch. Okay, well, of course, we can't practice in the shuttle, so we set up what's called a vertical access simulator, which was in the altitude chambers. Marty, over in the building where Marty used to do the Apollo work. And so we did is we took this configuration you see on the TV here, and we physically created a mock-up of that hardware so we can train.
There we are.
Okay, so again, I'm going to go back to basically, okay, and then the next text are from Bruce Birch, which you see there hanging. He's hanging on a hook there.
Hi, Bruce. Hope you're watching.
Yeah, he's one of my heroes. The guy's amazing.
He's one of your heroes. Another Boeing tech.
Another Boeing tech to do this job.
You know, you know that our wonderful displays come from Nick Enix, who is also a Boeing tech.
Yeah, these were Boeing techs that supported us in level 4. Again, the best guys in the world. He's hanging from a wire here, okay? And very, very dangerous operation. And again, to train, you do it one time at the pad for launch. He had to train, and I'm going to go through training to be able to do this. And he did that over and over again. Wow. I mean, every time he did this, okay, he may have done it 100 times, but every time he did it was very, very dangerous. With him doing it, and anyways, he pulled off. So let me read what they did for training. He said about a year before launch of STS-51B, Bruce Birch and Andy Petro were selected as the Boeing joggle tech. That joggle part we talked about was where Andy Petro was, and then Bruce was the module tech. He was the one with hanging down that off of that cable inside the module of the launch pad. Okay, and the team trained to load the monkeys, rats, and associated supplies to support Spacelab 3, Ames Research Center. And I won't say what it is, RAF. Jim Nail and Don Dolby, who again were two other techs, they were up in the mid-deck area, was where the winches were the controlled the stuff going up and down. So those are the two techs up in the mid-deck. Andy was in the joggle. Bruce was the one hanging from the cable. And then, and so 2 squirrel monkeys and 24 rats on Spacelab 3. It was a first mission to provide hands-on maintenance of animals in the laboratory environment, basically in the space lab. Now this is Andy talking. He says, I'm not sure how Bruce and I were selected for the honor, but we began the training under NASA engineers Bruce Morris and Bob Ruiz, which we'll see pictures of them in a bit. They were both mechanical engineers assigned to Ames Research Center for this payload. Training began as a weekly event for an entire day. Safety was a major concern and focus as we began with helmets, hoisting harnesses, wireless headsets, bosun chair, which is the chair they sat in and hung from the hook, which all had to be certified and checked out before each session. So every training session, that all had to be, okay to go. The training was held in the Operations and Checkout Building, High Bay. This is where the old altitude chambers were used in the Apollo days. A mock-up of Spacelab 3, the tunnel, and the mid-deck area were built inside the altitude chamber, showing that configuration we showed before to simulate basically the exact configuration we're going to be at the pad. So they trained just like it was going to be for the real thing. Now, the level 3 to McDonnell Douglas crew, these are the ones, level 3 to kind of distinguish was level 4 did the experiments part of Spacelab. The McDonnell Douglas people did the Spacelab module, the subsystems. That's the big difference. Well, the McDonnell Douglas techs were the ones that would set up the MVAC equipment. Here you've got the shuttle, which is shuttle people. You've got the MVAC equipment, which is McDonnell Douglas people. And then you got the Boeing, us NASA people. So there's 3 organizations that had to work together because, okay, well, you're putting this in my shuttle. Well, I put it in. No, it's our equipment. So do I put it in or does the shuttle people put it in? Well, the McDonnell Douglas people would put it in. Okay, well, now McDonnell Douglas put it in, but it's actually the level 4 people have to go down inside. So they operated it. So you had to have these 3 organizations all work together to pull this off. Again, amazing. It was amazing what they did. And so those McDonnell Douglas, they set up the MVAC equipment. They were responsible for operation and maintenance. It consisted of an apparatus that allowed 3 motorized hoists used in conjunction to support the operation. One hoist was used solely for the module tech, who sat in a bosun's chair the entire time and held them suspended in air the entire time.
I wonder how much time that is. Do you remember 30 minutes, hour?
Hours. He had to be in that hours because we had to load food and then two squirrel monkeys and 24 rodents. So he was in there for a while. He was hanging there for a while.
But that smelled very interesting after a while.
The other 2 hoists were used to lower the joggle tech down until he can tie off. Then there were 2 were used to lower monkeys, rats, and other stuff down into the joggle tech, where he transferred them to the hoist position and lowered them down into the module for installation. And we'll see some pictures of that later. All hoisting operations were done by the mid-deck tech, which operated per commands by the joggle tech and the module tech, who are on wireless headsets. They started out with using wireless headsets. The joggle envelope consisted of a ring with pulleys, because how do you get around that joggle? How do you get the cable around there?
Yeah.
With two hand cranks, that cranks would kind of allow movement for adjustment. This pulley adjustment allowed the joggle tech to move the module tech around to where he needed to be, because it's a big module and he needs to get over here, so they need to move the hook so the cable's hanging down over there, and then move it over here to do this work. So that's where they did the adjustment. Again, it's amazing. I wanted to make sure everybody understands what kind of amazing task this was.
Let's show the acronym, because the other pictures will play with.
Okay, what I want to show real quick here on this picture, what you're seeing, Bruce is in the trainer. What he has now, he has one of the rodent, the rat cages in his hand.
Yes.
Okay. Now they never really touched the rats or the monkeys. They were in these enclosures. And what he's doing, he's pulling
this on the far left there.
Yeah, that's
the left side there. He's
right.
got that in his hand.
That's in his hand, and what he's pulling it out of is
Marty's going to point that out there.
Yeah. Okay. And on the left there, the raft itself, or the animal, or the
There's our magic arrow.
Yeah, the rat. Yeah. That's what he's got in his hand.
Okay, so you'll see.
Okay. Well, how do you get that down there? Yeah. Okay. Well, the little rectangular parts was a GSE container that held that. That had to be lowered down. Bruce is hanging on one hook. Another hook comes down.
Wow.
Okay, so he has to pull it out of there, and then you see the door open to the left.
Yeah.
That was where that cage pulled out of the container and went into the flight rack.
Ah.
This is exactly how they would have done it at the pad. And so they practice this over and over again to make sure it was good. Yep.
What is
a RAF?
RAHF, a RAF. This is what Mikey's been talking about.
It's a research animal holding facility. It's kind of a generic term for facilities that hold animals. And so, and you don't want to say that every time.
People on the streets call it a cage.
Call it a cage, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can see you don't want to say that.
Not normal, Mikey.
Yeah. So that's what it means. Okay, so continuing.
And here
so continuing on with the training. Training started off slow and everyone got used to the equipment. Communications was essential for working because I had to communicate, hanging from the hook and all that. The first real problem was encountered with the communications. Originally, you had handheld set walkie-talkies to communicate with. This provided very cumbersome because both the module and joggle tech needed both hands to do the work, so how can they push a button while using their hands? Then they went to Radio Shack and got wireless headsets, but again, that required you to push a button. So finally, you got
1980.
This is 85, yeah.
Yes, Radio Shack and headsets were novelties.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, it works, but it didn't work good enough in this situation. So they actually started using what's called NASOIS, which is the communication system that we have at the Space Center. So that was what they found was the one that worked for them. So they proceeded ahead with that.
Was that like an early Bluetooth?
It's basically a wire. It's like the headset you see them wear with the cables. That's basically the way they communicated. That was the communication system. Now again, to use those, you still had to push the talk. So again, the module tech Bruce, he finally says, well, that's not going to work. And so what they did is they let Bruce have an open mic during the operation. So basically his mic was active the whole time, so he didn't have to push anything. So he can say go up and down and do whatever he needed to do. Several other problems were encountered. The device that lowered these equipments had chain that was connected to the hook. That started to get, when they lowered it and raised it up, it would get snagged on stuff. And so what they did is we decided we needed another holder for the food that didn't have chains. And so Andy and Bruce decided that they built aluminum frame structure which had a foam insert containers with cutouts for the food containers. The food containers are thinking like large silver items. These structures were wrapped with padded fabric to protect the containers, and Andy led the effort to do this. Okay. They basically hand drew it, developed it, built it. The new food containers were tested, verified safe, and they're a lot easier than the original ones. And he ended up getting a $5,000 award for this. Again, level 4 guys coming, there's a problem, this is the solution, they built it and they used it. Another issue they had was with the hoist. The cable connector sometimes would come off of the pulleys, and so the issue was addressed and they replaced the pulleys basically so that wouldn't happen. After working through all these issues, the training operations became almost routine as things went very smoothly. The monkeys and rats were held at Hangar L over on the Cape side, and that's where Bruce and Andy went basically to get familiar with the animals. We saw the monkeys, but we did not interact with them. The rats we got to hold briefly, why they pooped on this. It was a little interesting to know that we're going to be loading, that they be loaded by us and flying this mission, then return. You know, you can't help to think about the, you know, what happens then. Okay, and Bob Ruiz, as early as a Spacelab configuration, this is Bob Ruiz now.
Let's look at, explain this picture here.
Okay, this one,
Can
what
you
this,
see that, Marty, I got pushed just my monitor got sideways there.
okay, what this
I don't
one
know if
is,
Mikey could see that.
yeah, what this one is, this is during one of the training sessions. This is actually an enclosure with a squirrel monkey in it. Okay, they needed to do one operation with the animals so they can kind of get familiar with what they're going to experience. They didn't want the first time that happened at the launch pad hours before launch. And so this is in our trainer. This is in the operations and checkout building. This is basically them training with one of the actual animals. And this is the cage going into there to then be lowered down and used for training session. Yep.
Wow.
Okay.
Then here's the pad, kind of a schematic you have of the.
Yeah. And so, and so basically, and then I wanted to take a few more things about some of the work that they had to do. Let's see, during one of the training sessions, the joggle pulley released and dropped down, almost barely missing a tech, so they had to fix that. Bruce Birch, who again was the module tech, helped develop a tool, okay, for sampling the water. They had to sample the water as part of this, and so he developed a tool that they used for that. And it was not easy because there was a QD in the back of the raft that had to be reached and connected to. So basically, it's almost like a blind connection to do that work. And again, these guys had a problem; they solved it. Again, they're just amazing. Okay, then we showed the picture of the monkey. Okay, one problem here. This was from Bruce Morris, who was one of the engineers. I want to read this because this is not in the book. And
Hi, Bruce.
this is called an astronaut problem. And he goes, Spacelab 3 was the first time I got written up by an astronaut. He says, that was the first time I got into the group of you privileged people, which he was very, very flattering. They got told by an astronaut how stupid you are. Flight crew came down and signed off on a PR problem report that the cage fittings and the pull force. Bob Overmyer showed up about 2 weeks after that, and after the final close, that everything's closed up, ready to go. Well, he came in and said he disagrees with the findings, the reason they closed the report, and wanted to test the cages personally. He says we can't open it back up again until we get to the operating processing facility. It can't be do that because we have to do the closeout procedures, the power up, all the off-gassing tests. We'd have to redo all that if you touch anything. So Bruce said no. And he says, you understand you're going to impact the success of this mission? I said, yes, sir. He said, what? He says, could I have your full name? And Bruce goes, well, Bob, I'm Bruce Morris. And he asked me for my employee number and told me I'd be in my personal file, whatever that was. So I got to run upstairs and tell you guys that I joined the club of getting threatened to be wrote up by an astronaut. You guys were very proud of me. He says, I finally made the grade. Yeah. Okay, now the graphic cookie. Now that the pad. Okay, now this is the actual operations at the pad. What you're seeing here is this is all the people and the locations they had to be in to support Bruce as he did that, as he came down in that cable to do the installation.
You got all them stick figures there.
All those stick
people
figures.
People are supporting
his operation, the operation.
Bruce going down
and
the
doing
jog and everything.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, so I wanted to show this is all the people it took to do this. And of course, Bruce was the sole person who went down in there, but this is all the support people. These are the people that get that stuff in there, get that stuff to Bruce and get it installed. So it was a huge operation. Again,
we're going to show
hats off to these guys.
We're going to show you a couple of videos off of the your monitors, so forth. What do we have there?
Okay, what we got here, this is actually one of the enclosures that held some of that equipment. This is up on the 135-foot level of the pad, near the payload changeout room. Okay, the next one is, the reason I put this in there is there's walkways on the pad. I don't know if anybody's been on the pad, but it's just grading. It's not a solid floor. Okay, so it's all grading. So if you look down, you're looking 195 feet to the ground. Okay,
not me.
What I'm showing here is they had these walkways which are very small and narrow, and it had these tight turns.
Oh yeah.
And so these people and so you had to have the cart that would roll on this grading as well as be able to get around these corners. Wow. And so again, this is stuff that the level 4 guys had to design and come up with to make this job work. That's one of the reasons I wanted to show this photo here. Okay, this one is Bruce Morris. This is again the payload changeout room, which is on the 135-foot level. The crew access arm where all this operation handled was 195 foot. But this is Bruce sitting at the desk and kind of headset on, procedure in hand. And the monitors you're going to see, the pictures are from later, were above his head.
Rotary phone there.
Yeah.
From the 80s.
Okay.
there again is what he's doing.
Right.
There's a whole system there. I wondered about the jog thing down there.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear any stories about other astronauts worried about him kicking against the side of their?
That was a concern. Sure, that was a concern. That as he's down there, he's going to damage something, may kick something, may run into something. Oh yeah, but he trained so much.
That's why he trained so much.
That he didn't have
their confidence.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Okay, so I want to get okay. This is now the operations. This is basically the day it happened. The day or night. It's actually at night when it happened. Has come to perform the real operation. Andy can remember being very nervous. Of course, staying up all night because this loading has to happen, and it has to happen in the time that they worked for, or you scrub the launch.
The orbiter's already coming alive.
The orbiter's coming
There's
alive.
Hydraulics working.
They're getting ready to launch, and these animals got to go in very late. And if this goes bad, or if this takes longer, or if something doesn't work, you just bought launch. That's the last thing they want to do. So of course everybody's nervous. And Andy says, I remember not getting much sleep, all due to the stress and force of trying to get myself to sleep. Went to bed early, didn't really sleep. Woke up and headed out to the launch pad about an hour and a half. During the drive, I can remember feeling a little tired and hoping to snap out of it. When I arrived, I saw Bruce Birch, Bob Ruiz, and Bruce Morris. I began to get fired up for the operation. Adrenaline can help anyone get over a little tiredness. We got up to the middeck area, dressed up in our clean room clothes, donned our harnesses, helmets, etc. We performed the operation within our time slot without any issues.
Wow.
All of that training paid off. It says monkeys, rats, and food containers are loaded just like we trained many times. Without the extensive training we got from Bob Ruiz and Bruce Morris, it would not have been so smooth. At the end of the load, we all felt very good, the operation, how it went, and looked forward to removing them basically after the mission. Okay, and this is one of the last ones. This is Bob Ruiz talking about MVAC. Spacelab lead access operations plan performed flawlessly. It was the result of many weeks of training in the module simulator and the operations and checkup building chambers, which were used for the Apollo missions. And then it was really later activated for the space station for leaks and tests. Now for the video, we had a video that we were going to try to show, but we really couldn't get that to work. So what we do is we have a series of photographs. Now they're not the best photographs. Tell me, I give you an idea where these photographs came from. Don Dolby, who's one of the techs, had the original VHS tape made in 1985. Okay, and he basically got that to me. I had a friend, Jim Dumoulin, another genius who still works at the Space Center, convert that basically to a digital video. Okay,
So
and
they're very crude looking here, but imagine you're looking down.
Yeah, what you're doing,
into the tunnel.
Yeah, you're looking down the tunnel here, and the rectangular piece in the middle is basically the cage, the food cage, being lowered down.
I see. Okay.
Being lowered down the tunnel towards the joggle. Okay, the next picture, here's Bruce on the left, hanging from the hook with the food cage coming in on his right. Okay, now this is the enclosure where the food is basically in there, in those containers. So he's got to basically take a couple cables apart to be able to get into the food bags that are in his container. Okay, now the next photo, this shows Bruce again hanging from the hook on the left. The silverized thing you see in the picture is the food container. You'll notice on the bottom right, there's like a strap. What he did is he tied a strap off to a rack to keep him forward in position in front of the rack for the operation.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this is him again hanging down there, installing the food.
This was a week-long mission too, so you talk about food, water, and
Yes.
these little containers.
Yep.
Because the astronauts were not going to get in there, were they? And do
Well,
any
well,
experiments with it.
that's what they would use to feed, yeah, for feeding and that.
Okay.
But that's and so what I have here basically is a photograph of three of the people. Andy Petro's on the left.
Hi, Andy.
He was the joggle tech. Bruce Birch is in the middle. He was the one who was hanging on the hook.
Okay.
And then Bob Rue was the lead mechanical engineer.
Okay.
So there were three, and then there's a couple other people that were part of the MVAC team. Now, what this one is, the reason that I got two of them is this is a photo, but Andy's not in this one. So I wanted to make sure people saw who Andy was. This is both. They had two crews in case they needed backup or in case they had a scrub. So this is the team. This is basically the full team. You'll see Bruce Morris, who's on the top left with his name. Bob Ruiz on the bottom left. Those were the level 4 engineers. Bruce Birch next to Bob. Don Dolby there, you see his name. And then Jim Nail were the mid-deck techs.
Who was Bruce's counterpoint on the backup?
Good question. I never did
Was
ask
it
him that.
Don there?
never did ask
So
him.
that's something interesting. They always had
So
a
that-
backup,
so-
Marty.
yeah, oh, yeah.
There's always a backup team.
I
so
forgot to ask him. That's a very good
Yeah.
question.
So
So
there's
basically, that's kind of the team, and I wanted people that will see these people. Again, this is photographs from the 1980s, but they pulled this off. Again, it was an amazing operation. They worked.
Did they ever
months.
do it repeated?
We did multiple MVACs. In fact, a future episode, I want to talk about Spacelab D2.
Give the MVAC acronym.
Oh, MVAC. That's a Module Vertical Access Kit. It's
Module
basically
Vertical Access
kit. It's basically the cables and all that were used to perform the operation. Yeah, we actually had one that I want to bring up later, one of the future sessions from Spacelab D2, where we had a scrub at the pad. Okay, so we stayed at the pad. Well, we stayed at the pad longer than we thought. Well, we found out that there's items in the Spacelab that needed to be changed out that were never planned to be changed out. And so we had to basically do an MVAC operation with zero notice.
Wow.
Now, we didn't do the operation without zero training, but they had very little time, and that'll be a future discussion in the future. But one thing I wanted to show, the last slide, do we hopefully have it up there, was this. The video, we're going to try to show a video, couldn't get it to work. This is our Spacelab Payload and People website. This is what we're doing kind of as a follow-on to the book.
Mm-hmm.
So this will be the site people can go to basically see the video that Don had gotten me, and we digitized, and a good friend Maynette Smith, who operates this website, put the videos. There's 2 videos on it that show the operation. So if you go to this website, you can see those videos of him doing this operation.
Cool.
Again, it's amazing.
Check it out.
And again,
thank you for your staying curious.
And again, this is a spot where we're going to have all the information, all the future information that we're going to talk about here on Stay Curious.
Great.
Will be on this site. So I just wanted to bring that up.
I'll be checking that out. These things are in your book.
Yep.
There that we can get on Amazon Smile and help the American Space Museum there. And wow, what a wonderful little chapter of Space Shuttle history.
Yeah, it was again. My hats off to all those people were heroes in my book to do this work, and it was very successful. Like I say, it's not the only one. Future Stay Curious episode, we'll talk about other impact.
What a behind-the-scenes story, and thank you, Mikey Haddad, for sharing this with Space Resources is watching. Robert Law is watching in Dundee, Scotland. Hi, Robert. Francisco Scornia is watching in Mexico City. Thank you for watching, Francisco. Francis Zeke, it is, I think his name. Madeline Vanderleen's been watching us. Thank you. Bob K. Thank you for watching. Christopher Mick is an educator. He's in Hudson, Wisconsin.
Okay.
Tracy Keach, thank you for staying curious. Dave Stangy is, of course, watching in Michigan. Charlie Kersey, Rich Jones, new people. Marty, thank you very much. And Ophelia Sauterelle, she's in Normandy, France, enjoying
Excellent.
what Mikey has to share.
Thanks, everybody, for watching.
And, of course, Tom and Mark Usiak in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, who were also launch photographers. So we're grateful for everybody watching. Stay curious. Mikey, what an excellent little insight to an unknown area of the space shuttle. I never thought it was that complicated to get animals into their cages or their research animal holding facility, their RAF.
There you go.
And as usual, we're learning new stuff on Stay Curious. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
I enjoyed seeing you earlier this week at the Lunar Robotics Competition.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a shirt on about that.
That's actually a shirt from a past Lunar Robotics competition. Yes,
so
sir.
end our little program here telling us about those young minds of young, there was about 20 universities there, from Akron University to Purdue.
Wisconsin. From the military. We had a military academy there. And kind of what it is, it's a competition basically for college students to dig regolith, basically what's on the moon. And there's different classifications. You got where you have just the amount you dig. Then they've got what's called a spirit award, where who's got the most spirit. Then they've got a presentation award. So there's all these things that they gain points for. And of course, the ones with the most points at the end of the week win. What's happening? It's happening right now at the KC Visitor Center. Yesterday, Monday and Tuesday were the first sets of runs. There were 17 teams that ran. Today's a break. Those teams are going away. I think it's about 20 teams are coming in. that'll perform tomorrow and Friday.
Oh, real 2 groups coming in.
So it's 2 different groups. There is a site you go to on the Facebook page for Lunabotics, and they've got a live site. So you see a live stream.
Lunabotics.
Okay. Yeah. You'll see a live stream of what's going on out there. So if you can't
Okay.
physically get to the visitor center, you can watch it online. It's a lot of fun.
Well, where it's going on is, yes, at the Kennedy Visitor Center complex, but
Yes.
at the Astronaut Memorial Foundation
Yes.
building.
The education. Yep.
They're the memorial mirror
Yep.
in their education that Thad Altman and his team with Dave Hyatt and I was trying to think of the young lady educator out there. Anyway, Astronaut Memorial Foundation, what a facility that is to have this.
That's where they're having it. It's
Really,
inside there. Yes, sir.
yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, it's cool to see you out there, and so you can watch that again. The Lunar Robotics event going on, and the website again.
It's just off of Facebook
it's on
Lunabotics. Facebook Lunabotics.
Facebook Lunar.
And there's also a NASA site that links to the Facebook page, and that'll give you the links, the different links for the day.
All right. Well, we've enjoyed a good 50 minutes of staying curious today with things that you never thought about. At least I never did, of how to get some of those creatures into a laboratory while the shuttle's out there. Wow, what a way to do it! And
Yeah, it was amazing.
and the only way to do it too. So,
Yep.
Mikey, thank you very much.
Thanks again for having us, Mark.
Well, you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
And we will have you back for the shuttles of June. How many are there? What missions were they? Well, you stay with Marty and me, and we'll be telling you that here on Stay Curious throughout all next month. Tomorrow, we hope to have with us Space Hipster #1, Emily Carney, friend of the museum and friend of mine. And she's on Cloud 9 working with Celestis, a company that sent the ashes of a couple dozen humans to fulfill their life eternity wishes of orbiting the Earth. So it's only about $5,000, Mikey. I don't know. Does that appeal to you at all?
Yeah,
Your
sure.
ashes orbiting the Earth and
That
until
would
they
do it.
re-enter someday. So
I would do it. Yes, sir.
yeah, why take up the real estate on Earth? You know. Here, so. Well, thanks again, Michael Haddad. Thank you, Marty Winkle, for what he does as our Streamlabs engineer and co-producer here. So we hope to see you tomorrow with Emily Carney to bridge the space between us.